shake as I write these lines.
Are you washed in the blood of the Lamb?
Can God forgive us for what we've done to this world?
Who can know the mind of God?
This is The Substance with Trevor
and Philip,
and you are listening to the very first
episode of Substantive Cinema. We're going to be trying out a different, whole bunch of different types of show. Hopefully we'll be doing some interviews, some one-offs, some series, and some cultural reviews as well. I'm a big movie fan, and I try to drag Trevor along.
One.
I try to drag Trevor along whenever
He's
I
real
can
weird,
to the
folks.
films. Trevor,
Some weird movies. Yeah, what's up, Phil?
Brief for the audience.
Yeah.
Let's say since you've been in Kansas,
Sure.
how many years is that?
That would be 6 years and change.
Ballpark.
Yeah.
How many films do you think you've seen in the theater in the last 6 years?
That's a solid question.
Ballpark that.
Ballpark that one for you. I would say it's probably in the field of a tiny bit more than one a year.
How many of those have you seen with me in the theater?
A solid majority, I would imagine.
So I'm probably responsible for a decent amount of or at least we go along to some of the big ones together.
That's true. That's true. And it's mostly Marvel flicks.
True.
Other stuff, it's like, man,
You got a couple of kids at
Get
home.
that
It
Netflix.
gets harder.
yeah.
Well, and
that-
you're not.
After having kids, the number also probably went way down.
You don't. But you're not jonesing for the cinema. You're not.
No. Yeah, I am not like so you guys, here's the thing. Philip will watch a movie and I will watch that same movie and we have very, very different experiences somehow in the same film.
Even on
And
Marvel ones, but that one's a lot
like
closer.
Straight garbage sometimes because
false.
it's artsy.
That's false.
But this one that we're reviewing today.
Okay, you want to tee it up?
Yeah, we can talk about it. So the film that Philip put before my eyeballs.
Yeah, so this was my pick. The first one was my pick. I think the second one kind of might be my pick too. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, let's just be honest. You'll probably have all the picks.
No. Okay, and also one of the things. This is the first time I think I've actually told you this.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd love to, as we build a community, to have the listeners chime
for
in
sure.
with suggestions
Yeah.
of what might qualify as Substantive Cinema. I'm not going to steal your thunder. The one we're doing today has overt spiritual, theological content. That won't necessarily always be the case.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be Jesus juking you at the movies. But
Right.
there are a good amount, and this will be our first one, there are a good amount of solid films of substance that do deal with clear theological themes that might be good. And might be things you missed, too. This is one that I know a lot of people probably missed. So,
Philip, are we going to be recommending our listeners necessarily to watch these movies?
I think that'll be a great little... Maybe we can even make a segment out of that at the end, like ratings and recommendations at the end.
Yeah, stay tuned then, dear listener, for recommendations. So, having teased you this far, I don't think we've said the name of the movie yet.
But if they've clicked on it, they already know the name because it's in the
probably
title.
True. Boom. We are reviewing First Reforms, which is... So here's my movie prowess.
You gonna nutshell it? Okay.
No,
prowess.
I'm gonna tell him. I'm gonna give him some background. The listeners need some background, Philip.
And you're gonna edit all this. This is. I guess we're into it now.
This was literally what I texted Philip when he texted me this movie. I was like, Ethan Hawke, isn't that the guy from Mission Impossible?
That is true. I did get that text message, and
easy mistake to make, right? You know, easy to make that mistake.
And what was funny is like I had to take a second going, is Trevor joking with me? This movie stars Ethan Hawke.
100% legit.
And then I laughed pretty hard. And then I was like, oh no, Trevor's definitely serious about
100%.
this. Is Ethan Hawke the name of the protagonist in the Mission Impossible franchise?
He's also an actor.
He is not.
In First Reformed.
So there's
I just
just
thought
a little...
maybe somebody got ahead of the curve, you know, just like, you know, they really love Tom Cruise in that movie, and human growth hormones, blah blah blah. human growth hormones being what they are. Just now he's an old.
They've realized Ethan Hawke from the fiction of Mission Impossible into an actor.
You probably age yourself a lot too with the hard drinking that goes on in this movie as well.
Okay,
this is a very interesting theme. Well, I don't know. Do you want to go through like a time? So first off, too, I think we should probably tell our viewers. This is probably obvious if you've listened to anything that's ever a review of any content whatsoever. We're going to be talking about that content, and if you haven't seen it,
spoilers.
It's going to spoil stuff.
I don't want to get into the deepest of deep spoilers because, again, especially with this one or ones like these where I know because of the box office and the type of film it is.
Yeah,
I'm guessing that, and you know what? Hopefully, we can curate some really great listeners with high tastes. But even then, I'm not imagining most people have seen this film.
True.
So we're going to talk about it. A light spoiler alert.
Maybe light spoiler alert now. Maybe some hard spoiler alerts. I'll try to edit myself.
Well, no. Like maybe we'll even try to timestamp it. Like, hey, spoilers for 2 minutes. Skip ahead. Something like that, or maybe not. I mean, we should be talking. I don't want to not talk about it.
Sure. Yeah. Do you want me to just jump right into the heart of it, or you want me to start with it?
Well, no, that's fine. Before you jump right into that, okay. First Reformed. This just came out last year, 2017.
Oh,
it's
I'm on the cutting edge. I've seen a movie within a year of its release.
I know that is actually pretty wild if it's not a Marvel movie or a children's cartoon.
It's pretty amazing
for Trevor.
Yeah.
Written and directed by Paul Schrader of mostly writing fame of stuff like Taxi Driver and Raging Bull, but also has a bit of a directing career as well.
The man graduated, I think I read, from Calvin College, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So has definitely a theological background.
Yeah, trained for the priesthood.
Really interesting. Priesthood.
Which a number of...
but not Roman Catholic.
Correct.
They call them priests in the Reformed circles?
I believe, or...
I didn't realize that.
Didn't they call him Father Toller?
I don't think so. I think it was Reverend.
Reverend. My mistake. I've seen the movie a couple of times, and I just said
that's what I'm saying. This is the kind of stuff that these film guys...
I want to chop this all off. This is awful audio. So yeah, no, he was in seminary for a time, and then by his own admission, I've listened to... I've been a fan of his for a while.
Yeah? What's some of the other stuff that he's made?
I mean, the big ones are Taxi Driver and Raging Bull. He's worked a lot with Martin Scorsese. And The Last Temptation of Christ, I believe he wrote the screenplay for that as well.
That one's fairly controversial, isn't it?
There was a big brouhaha about it when it came out.
Got it.
So, like, and again, how do you say, like, just because we talk about something doesn't mean we give it recommendations without any sort of
caveats.
Yeah. So yeah, no, there definitely was a bit of a controversy. It's kind of silly, but that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
So, but he has been interested in the spiritual for quite a while. He wrote the book back in, I think it was the 70s, long time ago. I actually haven't read it. The Transcendental Style.
Transcendental Style.
I think it was the early 70s. And I think a new
pretty much
edition is coming out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there, especially European filmmakers, there was a lot of quote-unquote spiritual films where they were very sparse, and he actually utilizes a lot of the same techniques in First Reformed of the transcendental auteurs, or people working with that sort of material. Yeah. And we can talk about that as well.
Yeah.
So, how do you want to hit it?
Well,
given a little bit of the background there,
let's do... You want to do big picture plot summary first?
Sure.
All right. So basically what you've got is a kind of in his early 40s, 46 reverend of a historic church. Now, when I say historic, I really mean like the thing is pretty much like just a historical landmark, and the church itself that our main character, Reverend Toller, is a pastor of, is actually just, like I said, this tiny church that is being supported by this kind of mega church.
Yeah, it's a big plot point that they're building toward. It's the oldest church in the film, it's the oldest church in Albany. I don't know if it's supposed to be the oldest church in New York, but a big plot point is they're moving toward their 250th anniversary of basically having the doors open and services running. So 250 years old, oldest church in the county, maybe in the whole state.
Yeah, and this special service that they're going to have for the 250th year is a really big plot device. That's true. But another big plot device is also just this contrast between these two churches. Abundant Life being really a mega church. It's got all the full services. It's got the cafeteria. It's got the massive auditorium. It's got the live streaming. It's got Pastor Jeffers,
I believe.
And so you've got all of the typical stuff you would associate with just big, like traditional, I would say conservative, evangelical Christendom churches. And so,
like the spectrum between real, small, sparse. There was liturgy, but it was very sparse.
Yeah, he opens with the Heidelberg Catechism, actually.
Yeah, and you see them giving communion as well. Mm-hmm. But it's very sparse.
I think I saw a grand total of like 9 people in his pews.
Yeah, I didn't count, but both times it's very striking and obviously on purpose how empty the pews are. And First Reformed.
Yeah, and they also, there's a couple things, and I guess we can go in depth about all the contrasts here, but they even use, I feel like, color filtering on the film.
Oh, yes.
To drive home the contrast between these
kind of ascetic, monastic kind of.
The opening shot of First Reformed,
which is gorgeous,
of
by
the whole
way.
movie, is of the church, and it's bleak, it's wintry, it is
silent.
Desaturated, it is silent.
There's no music.
There is
at
a
all.
graveyard in the setting. And so that's kind of the feel. When you get to Abundant Life, it's
the exact
vibrant,
opposite.
There's saturated colors. There's a lot of things, and it's also it is a machine. They've got the receptionist desk. You got to get buzzed in to see the pastor. You can't just walk up to him, that kind of thing. So there's a big contrast here, and so it's all driving towards this meeting, and then one of the main characters besides Reverend Toller gets introduced in the form.
Yeah, there's primarily 3 characters. Three main players in the film. Really 2.
Yeah, I would argue. Yeah, really, I would say two main characters, correct, and then up to 5 players really as like sub.
Well,
sure.
But
yeah, the second.
If you go on IMDb, there are people in the film.
Thanks, Phil. But yeah, so the 2, there's this guy, Michael, and Michael is the husband of. He's actually not even an attender of this small congregation. He's the husband of a woman, or actually, I'm sorry, he's not even married to her, are they?
I believe so.
Are they husband and wife?
I believe so.
Okay. He had recently got out of prison for environmental activism, which is another big theme in the movie. And, well, he needs help. And his wife is the one that comes to Reverend Toller.
Yeah, his wife, very unironically, but also very, unceremoniously for a movie kind of like that's such a big wink, is the first real character besides Toller that we get introduced to is a pregnant woman named Mary, who attends his church, and she wants to have the Reverend basically do a counseling session with her husband. He just got out of jail. They have a kid on the way, and the husband's disturbed about some things, to say the least.
And she's actually kind of afraid. There's kind of an abortion theme that comes up in there.
Right away. Right away, the dialogue, again, it's not sensationalistic, but it's direct. It's, he wants to kill our baby, I believe is the line.
Yeah.
And it's just said this is what he would prefer. Can you talk to him?
Right. And so then we have really kind of the first long narrative dialogue scene of the movie, and probably the longest dialogue of the movie.
Let me back it up here for
a moment. Go for it.
Another main device that is in First Reformed, as well as many of other Schrader's movies, whether it's actually physical, tactile or not, is Toller's journal experiment.
Yes.
He's keeping a journal throughout the entire film of basically his inner life, because he's having trouble talking to God.
Correct. Yeah, big theme of prayer, the difficulty of prayer, and that kind of stuff that's developed throughout the movie as well.
So instead of praying,
Which is exactly what he says.
Reverend Toller, because he feels like his prayers are going on deaf ears, or it's too hard, he decides to keep a diary. And the goal is to be completely honest, not to edit anything, not to take any pages out, not to censor himself, but to be a kind of just a real-time account of his inner life.
And he feels like if he can just write it down, he makes a specific point that it's not going to be digital. He wants the very
He wants an experience.
He wants everything that's scratched out to be there. He wants the penmanship to be evidenced by that's showing kind of the emotion and everything. This is going to be a kind of a living document until he kills it, which he plans to do at the end.
Yeah, he was. I believe the plan was to keep it for a year and then shred it and burn it at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Not exactly sure what that hopes to accomplish, but it's something for himself because he's clearly. And I want to commend Paul Schrader. Obviously, he doesn't need my commendation, but I appreciate very much to have a film where essentially it's about a priest's crisis of faith that is taken very seriously, or a pastor. A pastor's crisis of faith that's taken very seriously. That's not. I mean, there's one very fantastical, somewhat jarring thing potentially for viewers in the movie, and then the ending's kind of up for grabs. But really, a very grounded film that's very unceremonious and pretentious or cliche. It's just kind of straightforward.
It is.
So he's not a caricature of, oh, I'm a priest struggling with my faith.
Right.
Like, I don't know if this God thing's real. But, like, it's real. These are things that, I know when it first came out, I read a lot of the press because I've been a fan of Paul Schrader, so I like Ethan Hawke. It looked right up my alley as far as art house cinema. But there were a lot of people in the religious community that I saw commenting online, whether it's blogs or Twitter, basically saying that, like, they have seen people in ministry that they were close to and knew, or they themselves that have gone through these same very things. Like the inner struggles of somebody whose job it is to speak for God is not it's not an easy job.
And I feel like
people make movies about cops and firefighters.
Right.
Being a pastor is a hard job.
Right, and I think it's a hard job that is probably not very well understood by a lot of people in, filmmaking industries necessarily.
Or really anyone that's not a pastor.
Yeah. And so I totally agree, and I think
because it's either
scene,
he's not a crazy person, or he's not a sexual predator,
right,
or he's not just like a con man. Those are like the real main like caricatures that you get when there is a spiritual leader type in film and television. Typically,
he's none of those things, and it really does come out in this first counseling session that he does end up having with Michael. And their dialogue and even kind of his reflection
that's where we
that
are.
you
Sorry
get to
about
see
that.
afterwards. No, you're good. And they talk for a long time, and we also learn some really important backstory about the Reverend,
about Toller himself,
during this time, and that is namely that he had a son die in Iraq. He's a military man. His family is a military family, and this death of his son in the war rocked him, separated him from his wife, and really sent him into what he would say was some despair. And he's kind of relating to Michael's despair, in which Michael's kind of laying out his case for why he thinks that the world is irreversibly damaged by the climate change and the carbon emissions and all the things that man is doing to mess up the world.
Yeah, by mankind's exploitation and seeming like lack of care.
Yeah. We're kind of introduced to a really important question that's asked during this time.
Michael's question.
Yeah.
And that does kind of reverberate throughout the film.
Yeah. And that question...
Well, I think it kind of gives voice to something that Toller's been dealing with and that maybe he hasn't quite put his finger on yet. So...
the question of, will God forgive us? Can God forgive us? And specifically in that context, it was, can God forgive us for what we're doing to his plan?
Creation?
His creation. And Toller has some really interesting responses. He does it there that he quotes Merton, or is it he? There's a lot of Merton influence. Thomas Merton was a Trappist monk and a kind of traveling. Well, he did travel for a while, but then he did settle down in Kentucky for a while, which is really interesting. I feel like checking out the Wikipedia page for Thomas Merton was really enlightening as well. There's a lot of crossover themes between the life of Thomas Merton even and this movie and Reverend Toller's life.
Well, it was, I mean, Thomas Merton is
It's Catholic.
yeah, very, I don't know the right way. I don't know say a favorite, a big influence, a significant influence on Paul Schrader, the writer director.
That makes sense. So
His theology and philosophy, more philosophy than theology.
Yeah, well, he was a very open-ended kind of guy as far as he believed in Christ, but he also believed kind of that any religion that you had would kind of get you to God. So some interesting things there, and had a big influence in the post World War II era on a lot of people, and kind of helped revive some monasticism in America. Very interesting. Check out the wiki page on that. There's some interesting overlaps there after you watch the movie. But so he brings up this idea that you need despair.
The
and
despair hope dichotomy
for life, and a dichotomy where it's like they have to coexist together in your life for it
like
to
a symbiotic relationship between despair and hope, where
Correct. And I think that's a big theme in the movie, personally.
it is absolutely.
Yeah. So after this counseling session,
He even says, I think that is where he maybe quoted him, something along the lines of balancing hope and despair is the point of life, basically.
Yeah. After this happens, kind of plot goes on. There's some other things that happen. I kind of
You also find out, in addition to his familial background and some of his personal tragedy, you also find out that's how he got introduced to the ministry after his family fell apart. Jeffers, the other reverend who we haven't met yet, from Abundant Life, basically ministered him, reached out. He's like, I got a job for you.
Yeah.
You broken man. I got a job for you, leading these 6 or 7 people at this church that is a bit of an offshoot or a ministry of Abundant Life.
So kind of interesting. You get into the church politics, that'll definitely come up. I have some theories about that as well that we'll get into here. But so what happens next, really, if we're just going to move the plot forward quick here for the audience's sake? 2 things happen. It's discovered by Michael's wife, Mary, that Michael has a suicide vest hidden in his garage. This is discovered, and Reverend Toller takes it, which is
very low key.
Which is he doesn't want to call the cops, which to me was like, I was really connected with him on the counseling stuff, but on the hey, let's not call the cops, like that was when I was like, that's questionable. But but I think it's actually really, really important to the plot, and we'll get once again. We'll get to some of my theories.
It's very
about that.
essential to the actual plot. But I mean, he cares for Mary. Mary apparently has been there for a while, and he's the father of a new kid. He's got a lot of stuff going on. He's like, okay, he hasn't used it yet. Don't want to arrest this new father necessarily.
He wanted to talk to him about it the next day.
It obviously
That's what
is not a great choice.
No.
If that was the real world. But it is, and again, it's not done with...
Any pastors listening right now who have
someone's
found
making homemade
suicide
explosives.
Vests, please call the police, the
Maybe
FBI,
it's my...
whoever you need to.
My progressive morals, but you can sympathize with him going, let's not turn him into the police, let's talk to him.
And I think there is a theme too,
that was
maybe here, that is the church's willingness in a lot of cases to kind of
sweep some stuff under the rug.
Let's keep it on the low, let's not get into, like, we can handle this. And as we've seen in recent news headlines, that's a problem.
Yikes.
Yikes. So yeah, I think that should be a red flag there, but it's an important red flag.
Oh, absolutely.
Let me jump along some plot points really quick. So he finds this vest. He keeps
So yeah,
it.
this is a little all over the place. Sorry, we're still.
He's going to no apologies. He's going to take this thing and
Talk
deal with
with
it
him
the
the next
next
day.
day.
Yes.
Next day comes around. Long story short, Michael realizes it's gone. Invites him out.
Sends him a text message.
Sends him a text message and invites him out to meet him in the park. When Reverend Toller arrives on the scene, the man has committed suicide with a shotgun.
In the first real bit of not even violence, post-violence.
It's kind of gory.
Yeah, but you don't see it happen, but you
It's
see
true.
you see him with his head blown off.
I mean, there's a pretty good shot of like the top of his head, like
sure, but you don't see him do the act.
No, it's true.
It's the aftermath. It's not pretty.
This is the point where I realized we're gonna need to link to like a. Everybody does this whenever they talk about suicide. They link to like suicide
Call somebody?
prevention.
Sure.
Stuff. Yeah, we'll have to research.
I think that's a great one. No, there's a number. It's great.
Take that aside out. So after finding Michael, he calls the police, and then things go into Michael's funeral. I think it's the next major plot point. And Michael's funeral is very interesting.
Very bizarre. Out of all the things that happen in this movie, the ending, which we'll get to eventually, the magical mystery tour and everything, his funeral was the thing that made me kind of
there was 2 points where I actually
squirm
laughed
and raise my eyebrows the most and just kind of go, okay.
Yeah. And there's some things we're skipping over here we'll get back into when we deal with some of the themes. But basically, he finds underneath Michael's laptop in his house this last will and testament, which outlines what he wants for his funeral. So they have this funeral at this kind of, it's an ecological site where things are just
it's a toxic
ruined.
waste dump, I believe.
Basically.
They said.
And the place is a ruin. And he basically has his ashes scattered there and has a environmental like fight song.
A Neil Young
what
protest song.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of it. I like Neil Young, but I don't get down with that sort of Neil Young.
And it's sung by
basically a hymn to the earth.
Yeah, sung by the Abundance Life Choir, that kind of thing. And the reason why this gets important is that later this gets brought up because kind of the main
CEO of the other.
Then we get introduced to this financier behind Abundant Life.
You're one of the major donors in the congregation,
and that is the CEO of Bulk Industries, which is just really for the purpose of the movie is just a bigwig kind of. He manufactures a lot of stuff, and he hurts the environment.
He's a heartless suit, making
basically
money.
And he's real upset about
because it got coverage. It got covered in the news
coverage.
That local man died at his funeral. His company's getting sniped at,
and it's connected
and
in the
Reverend,
news article. Yeah,
what
it's
upset
connected
him the
to
most,
Abundant Life.
The main connection, I believe, was that Reverend Toller presided. He officiated the service, and he would also be officiating the 250th thing that they were planning.
Right.
So basically, he's going to be like, he felt like the Reverend was kind of on both sides of the issue.
There's a scene in the diner, where they're kind of having a planning meeting together. Reverend Toller,
250th,
Pastor Jeffers, and
the CEO.
This guy, CEO, Mr. Balk, and they all sit down together, and Balk he kind of uses it as an opportunity to bring up and kind of chastise the pastor over this incident and say, hey, let's keep politics out of this, which is a very political thing to bring up in the middle of the planning meeting.
But just I have money. Why don't you guys shut up about your politics?
Basically just trying to strong arm him into making this thing go away. And for his credit, Reverend Toller, he stands up for it and he says, I think there are some things that are wrong here. And that's when we start to see that he's actually starting to own this cause.
Well, and that's something that Paul Schrader talks about a lot. Like the storytelling device that he said he used in his mind was kind of when Michael died, kind of ephemerally, or like that he kind of passed on his virus of radicalism in that moment when he texted Toller, "Hey, meet me here." He saw him, head blown off. That he kind of caught the virus. He caught the stem of that virus.
Yeah, in my notes I labeled that as soul transformation. Like it's almost as if Reverend Toller, and this is what I think is the main point of the movie, like the main plot device is that Reverend Toller becomes Michael.
Okay.
That's my kind of centralizing thesis of pretty much every other theme in the movie is
I can see
Reverend
how you
Toller
get there.
becomes Michael.
I don't necessarily think I agree, but go ahead.
You will. No,
I know. I can see how you line that up. And
it lines up with, I think,
effectively
everything.
that kind of does happen.
It's central. Yeah, I think like it's a really central thing that happens in the movie, and I think so. It happens in a lot of ways. Ultimately, after this political thing and him fighting back, we are finding out that Reverend Toller is very, very sick, and there's lots of things that you start to realize have been foreshadowed earlier in the movie, but this suicide vest that he had taken from Michael comes into the fore. He learns how to use it.
So already jumping there.
I am jumping, but yeah, he starts planning basically to use this reconsecration ceremony in which Bulk is going to be there, Jeffers is going to be there, the governor's going to, basically all these major players are going to be there, and he starts kind of planning to use this ceremony as a chance to kind of take out the powers that be.
And after that conversation in the diner with Bulk, he goes back home. I don't remember if it was the next scene or if it was one or two after, but where he is sitting in his room, looks at the vest, whatever, and puts it on. Like, that's really where the movie turned for me, especially the first time I saw it. Because honestly, if you're a film person or not, it's an amazingly crafted film. And the first time I saw it in the theater, there were only a few of us there. The movie's silence and unflashiness. There's really only one or two scenes.
Soundtrack except for.
There's only one or two scenes in the movie where they use quote unquote like movie tricks and editing to get a result that they are trying to do. Whether it's emotionally
very effective,
exactly, so that there's not much flash at all, so it just pulls you in. And
all of a sudden, there's this ominous music.
I remember when I saw it, that scene where he puts it on, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a movie written by the guy that did Taxi Driver. He's standing there in front of the mirror. He is now wearing the vest, and it's like, oh wow, like that's a powerful scene.
Yeah, it is.
Like
it is.
I don't know what kind of campaign they've got going, but I mean, that's like screenwriting or best acting kind of. That's what you send into the Oscars for consideration. That's a powerful scene.
Yeah, it really was.
Or editing, or it's editing or screenwriting. It's
all of a sudden you just hear this very ominous music that you after the whole movie being silent up to that point, and you just realize like I've seen that box before. That was when I saw. I was like, I've seen that. And I kind of figured, like, because there was this theme that develops of him taking Michael's stuff. It's just really weird. And it kind of just develops. He takes so first thing he takes is
his name on? Oh, no, the
vest. The next thing he takes is the computer. And he takes
he did take the computer.
Yes, he does. And
all the research kind of feeling.
Yeah, and you don't see him take it. You just, all of a sudden it cuts to a scene in the room, and they were very careful in their staging to show the room in very stark, like zero tech kind of setting.
No, he's got a bed, he's got a desk, and he's got a chair.
It's very monastic.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, you just cut to the scene, and he's in front of a laptop computer. The whole room is dark, and it's lit up by that blue screen light that you get from a laptop. And it just jarring. Where in the world did this thing come from? And you realize he's taken Michael's laptop.
I didn't even think about that specifically, actually.
Yeah, and that's just like crazy. Like, why
I've seen it a couple times.
Does he have Michael's laptop? And
he's got the note under it. I mean, I don't know.
It's really weird. It's extremely weird that
I've not thought about that.
Counseling an indivital
they killed
who
themselves.
Committed suicide. You just start showing up at your place with their stuff, like their laptop, especially. But this is how his soul transformation, what I'm calling it, like starts happening. Is it's not just Yeah, maybe in that suicide he gets that virus and it starts acting itself out in him just kind of assuming these roles and just and he just picks up where Michael left off, opening up his history, the things he's linked, his files, all this research, and you see these ideas, the danger of ideas in a way, kind
Absolutely.
of pouring in,
like
through
toxic.
this.
Well, because he already is a bit of a broken, disturbed, troubled guy.
Yeah.
With a lot of pressures on him. I
Yeah.
mean, he doesn't have the pressures of a pastor with a sizable flock, but he still's got to show up every. It really, yeah, it's a spiritual inner movie because whether or not he's got a lot of people, he's got to show up every week and speak for God. And at the very beginning of the movie, it's established he doesn't feel connected to God.
Well, and I think the man is very clearly dealing with some, from the very get-go, some deep, like soul disturbance in the fact that he himself sent his son to war that he even calls unjust. So a war that he ultimately doesn't even believe in, and his son dies as a result of this. And it was his persuasion, and now he has to bear the consequences of that. And so I think everything is kind of he's just this broken man, even from the get-go, and there's some of the signs from that. But yeah, so he starts and what's interesting is Michael's kind of a broken man as well.
Michael's a very
Obviously, very disturbed, ends up, committing suicide.
He seems to love Mary. They have a kid, and he doesn't want to because by the time his kid is 30, he doesn't feel it. So
he thinks it's going to be totally anarchy.
He
in
thinks
the
the
world.
world is going to be like catatonic, and that he won't have a good reason for bringing life into this world.
Yeah. So you have Reverend Toller, a man of despair, kind of starting to take on the life force, in a sense, of Michael, this very also disturbed man. Takes his laptop, and then that also sets up the final thing, which is Mary wants to box up some of Michael's stuff, and so what does Reverend Toller do? Of course, he takes all that stuff that he helped her box up, and once again brings it all to his place. Yep. And starts perusing through all these photos and all these different things that are happening, and it's almost as if by doing these things,
by osmosis,
he's gaining Michael. He's taking on, and not only that, he's starting to understand the context and the backdrop for why this vest existed. And not only that, he is becoming persuaded to take on this mission. He's figuring out what Michael's mission was, but he's also assuming that role. He's starting to pick up the mantle in a way. And so
he definitely does that. I didn't necessarily pick up him acquiring those things.
It's so weird. Like, you would just never do that. You would never just like take some person you're counseling and start taking all their stuff.
Yeah, it's true.
And rifling through it in your private quarters. But yeah, he does. And so fast forward to, I guess, you want to jump to the... I think there's one more character we need to introduce before we get in there. And that is the character of Esther.
Esther, that was her name.
Yeah, so Esther is... We first meet Esther. She is directing a choir, just a vocal choir of 5
awkward
students.
Kids.
Yeah, 5 students, awkward kids, in Abundant Life, in the big sanctuary. And
that's really the first time there's music in the film.
Huh. Yeah, that's
Are You
true.
Washed in the Blood?
Yes. I think the hymns that they choose for the movie too are all
very purposeful.
Very, very, everything's very purposeful. And we'll get into some of those in a little bit, but you can tell that they have this kind of connection, and it feels, from the off, it feels romantic. It feels like there's some sort of
they have lunch
past.
together. They have lunch together.
There's
you
some
can tell that
past.
they're connected.
Yeah, and they do have lunch together, and they even mention what we did together.
That's not entirely clear, but it's pretty clear.
I have a theory, which I'm like 100% certain as to what's going on. because I think there's plot device in the movie to tell the viewer exactly what this relationship is, and the reason why it's unclear is because
The confrontation in the latter half of the film.
yeah, everything leading up to that. And so ultimately, so they have this initial meeting. It's a little awkward. Then they have
think they
lunch
only
together.
I don't think they have more than 4 scenes together.
Yeah, which is also really awkward. And then finally, at the final scene of the movie, it really reveals what Esther is to Reverend Toller.
Yeah, what she actually is.
Yes, and which was not mentioned in that other review. This is the part that McCracken missed in his review objectively, because he called her a church member, but she is not a church member.
She was in that.
She is a church member, but the most defining thing about her is she is actually Reverend Toller's wife.
Okay.
For sure.
Okay.
Estranged wife.
Interesting.
And the way I know that is because she has access to his medical records.
Is that it?
Yeah.
She's a secretary. Like,
There's no way. There's no way. HIPAA laws being what they are, you don't call up some
What?
cancer place and get medical records for somebody
It's
unless
a
you are
small
family
town.
or spouse. Nope.
Yeah, okay. Go ahead.
So the thing about this, and the reason why you wouldn't
Did you
think
do any
this-
research to check this theory out?
Nah, man, it's research is right there in the film, man.
Crazy theory.
No, it's 100%. Like it explains
I'm down for
everything.
some crazy theories.
It explains everything about their relationship. And here's the thing that makes it. Here's the reason why you wouldn't think so is because Reverend Toller already has a backstory for his wife. What he tells Michael is that she separated from him because she couldn't bear to live with him after what happened with their son. After their son got killed because he had persuaded. He doesn't say this about Esther. He just says about his wife. And so that's the story that we're told. But here's the thing about Reverend Toller. He says a lot of things about himself in the movie that are proven to be lies later in the movie. He also tells Michael, for example, that he doesn't drink when he's offered whiskey.
He did not say that. He said, "Does it help?" He said, "It doesn't help, does it?"
He gives
He
the
evaded.
distinct he evades, and he gives the distinct impression that he doesn't, and he does at least lie to Jeffers later about his alcohol consumption.
He does. He says like a glass of wine here
Wine.
and there or
Yeah.
something like that.
The man is drinking he is literally only drinking whiskey. It seems like, right?
and he drank it for breakfast.
That's the
he
only
dipped his like morning bread in it.
It's literally,
Had it
other
in
than
the
that
evening.
bread, the only subsistence we see him have the entire movie long, except for one meal at the end.
What
which-
about when he's eating with Esther?
what did he eat? Do you
I
see
don't
him eat
remember.
anything? I don't see him eat anything. I think they sat down in the cafeteria, but I didn't see them eat anything.
Okay, go on.
And the one meal he has, I think, is kind of intended to pick up on a martyrdom theme that's also in the movie.
Interesting.
Which is, I think he's really kind of eating it almost as his last meal. It seems like. So that's my theory, and I think that's why he hates her so much. That's what they've done together. They were married, they had kids, and he separates from her because he can't live with the despair. And I think Jeffers, in kind of picking up the situation, ministering to him, hey, maybe he needs some time by himself. We can keep him in the fold. Let's get him over to this small congregation here that he's not going to really be affecting anybody. He's really just a souvenir shop anyway. That's what the kids call it. And he can look over it. We can look over him, and he'll be fine. We can help him spiritually recover from this loss. And it's not going well.
Now you've really just kind of derailed this. What else do you think?
Just blew it wide open.
Well, no. Maybe not.
So
What if you're wrong though?
what if I'm wrong
What
about
if that's not the case?
Then I think you need I think there's a lot of explanation that you would have to do about what their relationship is and what's the point of her character, which I didn't see explained everywhere. She is a very important character,
You don't
and you
need
can
to-
tell that they have a relationship.
Sure, but I mean, not everything needs to be, especially in movies like this that are about one guy's like, not everybody else does. But I mean, the impression I've got from the times I've seen the film were that they've been romantically involved since he and his wife have separated, likely sexually, but like they clearly have like a romantic connection, and
But he's
he
also
finds
not
her-
interested in romance with her. He says that to her. That it's in
Sure.
their dialogue.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, but she still is.
moving forward.
Yeah.
It sounded like they tried and
They
it
had a
didn't work out.
past. Yeah.
Because he even said,
So I think the fact that they had a sexual past, like, I don't.
he says like, I'm not built for that, like relationships. He did say that to her, and I guess that could be read either way. Like,
I
I'm not
think-
built for
Yeah.
the marriage that we had.
I think the straightforward interpretation of the dialogue that they have and the kind of relationship they have, the thing that makes the most sense is that's his wife.
Well, I will rewatch it with that crazy theory in the back of my head and see
Sure.
what I come up with.
It,
What else?
So ultimately, he ends up kind of progressing towards this event.
We're basically
And-
just telling the story. Is that what we want to do with these?
I mean, we got to give a plot summary so that we have something to hang a review and,
Sure,
and
that's
themes
it's
on.
a bit of a okay, yeah. Because I
Um,
mean, I guess that what we're going to be doing together, what we could probably do better, is kind of come at it from a what does it have to say, both in our shared expertise and for the sake of the podcast.
Sure.
This isn't going to be like
And we can edit some of these things down.
sure,
But
but this isn't like a purely technical review of the film.
no, and so anyway, so
Very interesting.
ultimately, what happens later?
Did you talk to your wife about this crazy theory?
Yeah, she agrees.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Christina watched it with us. So basically, the next thing that happens is he's kind of deepening his relationship with Mary, which makes sense as he is becoming more and more Michael. It makes sense that he's kind of he's literally picking up the mantle of Michael in a lot of ways, and I think
Sure.
including being Mary's significant other, which kind of I think the full transformation finally is accomplished in the weird scene. I think, and she even uses the word. She had a title for it. Do you remember what the title was for it?
Yeah, and I was going to tell you the Magical Mystery Tour.
Yes, the Magical
It's
Mystery
a reference
Tour.
to a Beatles album by that name.
Okay.
It's basically like they go on like a shared little trip
hmm
emotionally.
And I think this. So this magic. This is honestly the most awkward scene in the whole movie. I would say.
I mean, it didn't make me as uncomfortable as but I understand. It's a strange one. It's very strange.
I mean, yeah, the funeral one. I laughed at the funeral, and I laughed at the. I had to laugh because it was just like, this is so.
I was
weird.
actually pretty upset when I saw it in the theater.
Yeah.
So
So.
no. I was upset that it got ruined because I saw in the trailer the
Oh.
levitation, and it was not a surprise to me.
Oh yeah. So basically, what happens? So hard spoilers. PT dubs. We should edit that.
We can go back.
Yeah. So basically, what this magical mystery tour is literally, Reverend Toller lays down on the ground, arms outstretched.
It is
and
awkward. For
Mary
sure.
comes and just lays on top of him, also arms outstretched, like their palms touching,
It's like
just
as
like-
much physical contact as you can possibly
as you
have.
can possibly get with this pregnant woman. It looks astoundingly uncomfortable.
Who is
by the
like
way.
also someone else's wife,
And
minus
he's
suicide a day or two.
I mean,
She's a fresh widow of suicide.
as a seminary graduate myself, like as soon as you see this, like grieving widow,
Yeah.
alone,
knocking his door,
being
like,
invited into his private residence, you're like, alarm bells are going
You're
off.
like, oh, this is going to
get
be one of
bad.
those kind of spiritual movies.
I honestly thought so. I was like, okay, so he's a creeper. He's gonna do, but they don't do anything.
No, they don't.
They don't do anything
Physical.
sexual.
Yeah.
Well, they definitely do something physical. They just don't do anything sexual.
That's true.
But
But it is more of an emotional, like,
Mhm.
it's like they go on a sort of
and I think this
shared,
magical.
a non-narcotic shared kind of intense emotional trip.
Correct. And I think this is where he really does like. I think this is the vehicle in a sense where the soul transformation is complete.
The actual transformation.
He is Michael at the end of this, like, and he even mentions, which is really weird. There's two things that happen that are really weird after this. It comes back to the journal and the prayer theme. One is he wakes up and then like he goes to this thing and he talks about prayer and he says he's found a new way to pray.
Yes.
So now,
It's kind of like it dislodged him from his rut.
yeah, and so he it's kind of like he's got open communication with God, and I feel like he takes this as almost divine approval for his newfound radicalism. That now that he's got this experience, he is Michael now. Like he has his cause, he's planning this thing, and now he's communicating with God like never before. He is convinced by this mystical experience, and mystical experience is also a really big thing for Merton.
Yes.
So there's a big connection there, and yeah, at this point he's got that approval, and he also has pages torn out of his journal, which
He does.
he said he wouldn't do.
Did.
And I think that's clear evidence of a break in personality.
Yes.
That Jeff, like in a sense, Toller is gone, and now it's Michael. Like Michael is Toller, not totally. I don't want to go too hardcore on in the paint with that, but he's kind of assumed this soul, and so like there's this kind of
he's
weird,
changed. I didn't necessarily take it as
maybe not that far, but like he's
not specifically he's become this other guy, but like he has the cement has hardened in this.
Well, in the
this
Christian
new
way,
radicalism.
in the Christian way that we talk about, like becoming a new creation or having our soul unionized with Christ, right? Like I think Paul's, what's his name again? Schrader?
Paul Schrader.
Paul Schrader. He's a guy who knows Christian doctrine and knows about kind of this idea probably of union in faith and that kind of stuff. And I feel like what we're watching is kind of a union of soul in a sense with
Toller and Michael.
And one of the things too that's said at the funeral of Michael is that although his physical remains are gone, his memories and his spirit kind of lives on. And that's specifically mentioned in the funeral, and it lives on through his cause, through his soul, and it lives on through Toller himself ultimately. And so he kind of he has this experience with Mary. There is something about as well, like when a loved one dies, like there's a sense in which a part of you dies. Like there are parts of Michael that live with Mary. I mean, not Lisa, which is child, but
Sure.
I mean, also the memories that he has of her. So I feel like there's almost like this transfer in a sense that almost takes place in this mystical scene where that's why I'm saying like he, in a lot of ways, this is like a culmination of his
Sure.
journey to Michael Dumb.
Well, and one of the nice things about films of this quality and films of this sort is that they really are open to interpretation.
Sure.
And a number of there's not one right way to read this film.
Except the one you're going to hear right here, folks.
Of course. But there's not just one answer.
I agree with you. It's art. That's the reality.
I'm going to rewatch it and see, because I was going
out.
back through my notes. I didn't take as extensive notes as I was hoping to again, because it's a very gripping film that brings you in.
Yeah.
He said, strangely, to Esther, no marriage can survive the death of a child.
Like,
he did say that.
Yes.
It's like that did kind of stick out a little bit. It's like that's a weird thing to say
to somebody who's not your wife.
No, not necessarily. But that's a weird thing to say there. Like that wouldn't have been weird to say, like if he was telling a story to Michael and he's like, "Yeah, my kid died, my marriage fell apart. No marriage can survive the death of a child."
But I think he's explaining their estrangement. Because she's
that
still
can
trying.
be read that way for sure.
Because she was trying in that
I'm
scene.
going to tweet at First Reformed, see if I can get an answer at this.
Yeah, for sure. Esther. So in that
Look
scene,
at
Esther
you.
is trying to.
You only watch one movie a month, but you come prepared.
Just take notes. But so anyway, their dialogue, everything I think is explained by that theory. But anyway, so after his kind of soul transformation to Michael, we're now ready for his final scene. He's kind of ready to use the vest. And
there's a very important scene before that.
Hit me with that.
The setup is things have kind of blown over. Like Mary is starting. Like I didn't catch that Toller had taken all of her stuff, all of Michael's stuff, but she kind of cleared all the stuff out, and she's just gonna go visit her family.
Yeah,
she wanted to visit her family after the reconsecration. She wanted to show up to it, and he was by then he had already decided what he was going to do internally, and was trying to dissuade her from coming to the thing.
Yeah, and he tells her straight up, "Don't come," and she says, "Okay."
Kind of harshly.
Yeah, because she's like, "No, it'll be cool," and he's like, "No,
Yeah,
it'll be."
they went back and forth 2 or 3 times.
He tries
and then
to
he put his foot
persuade her,
down.
like make it,
And then he
has
just-
her own decision. But then
Yeah.
when it's clearly not taking, he just is stern with her.
Yep.
And so
And
that
she
kinda,
seems to accept it.
so, and that kind of sets you up for the reconsecration ceremony, where, spoiler alert, she there.
Unsurprisingly.
Yeah, totally. But what is he gonna do? Was the question I had.
The shocking, surprising thing is not that she comes, but like he is standing there in his little area of his parsonage or whatever,
Yeah.
with his vest on, already crossed the line, no question in his head, gonna do this, and then the only thing he cares about that he doesn't want to destroy is there, and then that's the dilemma.
And he chooses what? We don't know. Spoiler alert. We don't know what he chooses.
Well, we know what he chooses, but we don't know what actually happens.
So
we know what he chooses as far as taking the action with the bomb, I'd say. We know what
he
that is.
unplugs it, but I mean, so here's what happens at the end of the movie.
I guess hard spoilers then.
Yeah, this is for real spoilers at this point. He has this barbed wire which he had pulled out. He's a hoarder kind of. Like every single thing that he touches in the movie, he ends up like back in his apartment.
I will also rewatch it with that in mind. Sticky Fingers Toller.
Sticky Fingers Toller.
He only owns like 2 things. He's like, I'm tired of having a sparse room.
Yeah, it's like his material possessions increases like 200% during the movie. But yeah, he grabs this barbed wire, like some animal had died in it, and he's like real frustrated about like, causing harm to creation at this point. And so he grabs this barbed wire. So anyway, he has this barbed wire, and here he is at the end. He just wraps it around himself and cutting
In
himself
lieu of the
all
suicide
up.
vest.
Yeah, in lieu of the suicide vest, and puts on this like white robe. I mean, very messianic kind of overtones.
White robe
here.
dipped in blood.
Yeah. And that's it. What happens next? I don't know.
He drinks a glass of Drano.
No, he doesn't. He dropped down on the ground.
That's true. That's what you see him do.
Yeah. Maybe
It is
we
edited.
don't know.
It's edited, and again, little inside baseball here. I know that Paul Schrader took extreme measures to make that as open-ended as possible.
Yeah.
He ran through a bunch of test screenings, and at the end of the screenings, he'd poll the audience. Do you think Toller lives or dies? Do you think he's dead and that's a hallucination? Or do you think that actually happened? The end. And whenever he would see his goal is to get it as close to 50-50 as possible.
Yeah.
So if people are like, oh, no, he's definitely alive, and she comes in and they embrace at the end, and then that's the end and it's hopeful, or no, he's definitely dead. This is a hallucination. He tried to edit and tweak to try to get it as open-ended as possible.
Yeah.
Because you're thrown up because the door's locked. There's no sound of her coming in. She's just in. Like, the door's locked. Jeffers can't get in. It's locked. There's no sound.
No, yeah.
But then she's just
That's the
there.
one thing I couldn't wrap up was what the ending was all about. You're totally right. It's got to be a hallucination. I totally agree.
Is that him dying and his grace, his entrance into his paradise, or is that his earthly salvation?
No, I think I totally agree with you now. Yeah, I think that's the only. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. Like, what is he doing with this barbed wire on? Like, what is he gonna do next? Like, all right, congrats, you got barbed wire wrapped around you. You have a congregation of people waiting for you. You're making out with this woman who is like, I mean,
A pregnant fresh widow.
My whole thought was, man, that's gotta hurt. Like that barbed wire for both parties. Like that is ouchy.
It was a close embrace.
And there's obviously this kind of suicide. Like, what would be the next step for that character? He has no next step.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, I guess, in a sense. Like, I had like imaginations of
characters make decisions, and
maybe he goes on from there, and
maybe he bleeds out, or
maybe he bleeds out. Maybe he takes it off and is like, that was kind of silly, and goes on and fights for environmental justice for the rest of his live long days.
Who knows?
But I think in light of everything that you're saying, it does make the most sense that he drinks it, goes crazy. Of course, what are the effects of drinking Drano?
No idea. I don't want to figure that one out.
Dude, you should Google that stuff.
Oh, he filled up a glass. It's not like he accidentally got a little bit in his mouth.
Well, I know. Listen. I know it was harmful to him. I'm saying, will that produce hallucinations?
I can tell you for certain that the actual answer to that does not have any bearing
Effect
on the reality of the film.
Oh, I know that. Look at this. Effects of drinking drain cleaner. It even pops up. Poison control expert help online or by phone. Here's what really happens if you drink these things from the Daily Meal, August 18th, 2017.
I guarantee you, whatever this says,
It's not
doesn't
pretty.
matter. Sure. Guessing death. Or bad.
You know, it could cause maybe unconsciousness, and we can say that it would happen during then. For the sake of argument, like it's
The
not
movie
like you
doesn't
said.
need to be based.
It doesn't
in
need to be that
reality.
serious. No, it doesn't need to be that serious of a thing.
Either he's dead or he's not.
Only in suspension of disbelief. But
Either that is a
I like that
dying
theory.
hallucination,
I like
or
that theory.
that is
She
earthly
somehow
salvation.
got in. Yeah, somehow she gets in anyway. Maybe she opens a window. Maybe she's willing to try stuff that Jeffers wasn't. I don't know. Interesting. Oh, but the white robe also kind of speaks of, I mean, if putting wrapping the barbed wire around is like cross and death, then the white robe could be like
resurrection.
new life,
Interesting.
but like because he's dead.
And then his paradise could be the embrace.
Yeah,
It's a theory.
that makes total sense. I think that the whole time what I'm saying is his wife is now singing,
She was.
leaning on the everlasting arms.
And she is singing as the film fades to black.
Correct.
Slow motion, 360 shot of Toller and Mary embracing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So
one of maybe the second, if you don't count the Magical Mystery Tour, maybe the second actual effect, like camera work designed to do a thing emotionally and story wise.
Yeah. So let's jump into some of the themes.
Let's jump
here.
in. So
that's an hour.
So
Let's jump into the
ratings, reviews, thoughts.
Let's jump into some of the what would you take away from this film, or what's the moral of the film?
I don't think there is one necessarily.
I think there's one.
I think the moral, because it's, again, not personally, I know and I'm relatively familiar with the guy who created the story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was asked at one of, I don't remember if it was a press screening, or I think it was because they did a seminary tour as well, and they screened the film. And I feel like it was one of the main film festivals, the regular secular ones, and they asked him if he had any hope, and he just straight up said no.
No.
He's a very hopeless man.
Yeah.
He feels a lot of the environmental things personally, but beyond that, because he was raised, I think he's got what the Bible refers to as worldly sorrow. I feel like he's got a lot of worldly sorrow for the life he's lived and the choices he's made, and has no hope.
Yeah.
Because of he doesn't have sorrow leading to repentance and redemption and joy. He has sorrow leading to destruction. And that's very on display in a number of ways in the film.
So maybe I took away a little bit different, but here was what I saw happening. I saw that Reverend Toller is becoming Michael, and through the development of narratives of martyrdom, especially
which is absolutely major,
where he's talking about early on with Michael, he talks about Christian martyrs. Michael actually asks a question about Christian martyrs, and then points out that he was
trying to parallel them to the environmental.
Yeah.
The people who lose their lives fight. Basically, it's like, aren't both of these people losing their lives for their convictions?
Cause. Exactly. And ultimately, I think Toller ends up buying that. And I think the film almost, in a sense, it's a weird thing to say, but I think it's almost like saying, is this okay? It's probably more okay or it's probably more correct than you would want to think up front. And Toller, at least, is one who, at the end of the film, is 100% on board with this idea of martyrdom. There's martyrdom in a sense in the backstory, like the war in Iraq, like that is an area known for that kind of thing. Um, the subject of jihadists and extremists is brought up with a conversation with Jeffers in the cafeteria. And so this theme of martyrdom goes through, I think, all the way so that he really ends up believing that he is doing something saintly with this action.
Yeah.
And there are the themes of prayer and the journal. The other important thing about the journal is the very last thing that we see happen with the journal is he is writing in it and we do not hear him narrate it, which is the first time in the entire film it did that.
Say that again?
So every time in the film, there's something that happens. And when he writes in the journal, he reads an excerpt from it. You hear him narrate.
Yeah, he's basically narrating it, and you see him.
He's
usually catching up to where he is.
Right, he might not even read all of it, but he reads some of it,
Okay.
except for the very last scene. He has stuff written in the journal that he had just written, and there is no narration.
Is that
of what
where he
wrote
rips
in
it
there.
out?
No, the pages that you see ripped out are already ripped, I believe. I think this is just at the very end, and I think it's just kind of this idea of perhaps he doesn't need the journal anymore, and he has his new way to talk to God, which the journal was standing in for, and so that there is no voice in the journal anymore. His voice is in his action, it's in his martyrdom, and God, he has his approval, he has his connection with God now.
Interesting.
And so the journal is now silent. And so it kind of so you've got this kind of essence of him becoming Michael, and his description of Michael early on. The descriptions of Michael are all negative. He's disturbed. He's just morbid, SOB, according to the police officer. And he throughout the movie, the descriptions of Michael become more and more holy. Eventually culminating with a description of him as him standing on holy ground at the moment of his death. And so Michael becomes actually a saint. He becomes kind of enthroned as a hero in the movie. And so I think this mirrors Jeffers kind of taking Michael as not a disturbed man who did something silly and dumb and was harmful to his family, but a martyr just as much as the Christian martyrs who died fighting for
he does
a
start
cause.
to see him that way clearly, like he is a pastor of a church, and he's wearing the suicide vest at maybe 2/3 of the movie.
Yeah. And so I think another thing that is kind of pointing towards the moral rectitude of this is the church's hypocrisy.
Yes.
And that is writ large across this entire film. The idea, the politics that happens in the church, the very first thing we mentioned at the start of this is the distinction between the two churches, and the real big abundant life church is kind of ironically named, and it doesn't have abundant life in a sense because it is complicit in the abundance of life being destroyed in the earth by their backers without them being willing to say anything about it. And
it's more of the prosperity gospel, charismatic type.
And there's this scene that also kind of drives this point home.
The lunch scene?
The lunch scene when they're in the circle with the kids.
Oh, okay. No, I thought you were talking about how they had like Acts 2 up there talking about like how everybody was together and nobody was in need or whatever. The actual text on the wall.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some irony there, right?
Sure.
I didn't necessarily agree that it was about the church's humble beginnings versus where they were at, but I felt like it was kind of this irony of like social activism is a big thing that is shown as like positive in the film, and
eventually, yeah.
And the church, a lot of people would argue from that text that they were like socially active in caring for each other and kind of dwelling in, some people have said before, communistic even relationship, which I disagree with, but there was definitely they cared for each other and they cared for actually ministering to real needs. And
Sure.
there's kind of this idea that in this sterile, cold kind of cafeteria, is that really going on?
Sure.
And there's this kind of
The youth group.
meeting
Yeah.
where it is the big distinction driven is this kid who kind of knows nothing finds prayer really easy. And Tuller's in there and he finds prayer distinctly very, very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it drives at the question, who has the real experience? Who's actually really experiencing God here? And you can just leave that as a question, but I think the answer is that ultimately towards at the end of the film, Toller has found a new way to pray. He's found real connection in what he's doing. And the kid's shallowness is kind of
and
pointed
again
out.
what's interesting, that is like it's a film. It's a film made by somebody who likely doesn't have a redeemed relationship with God,
Sure.
who is making observations and statements that are theological. So
Yeah.
it's not about...
Let me say one more thing about how this comes out. There's a kid who asks a really tough question about her dad, and this really kind of humorous scene in that, like, the youth staff there,
At Abundant
the
Life.
tattooed dude at Abundant Life,
The hipster pastor.
yeah, turns to the guy from First Reformed and just is like,
So that's a hard one. Why don't you take that one?
Why don't you try to answer this? And he can't even answer the question because somebody interrupts. But I think the point there is, like, they don't have an answer. They have kids, like, as long as kids are just, oh, I'm doing great.
They have a very impressive music ministry. They have snacks. They have food. They have a lot of the flash.
Yeah. And I think that what's also really interesting is the guy that ends up interrupting Toller's answer is this very kind of, he has conservative kind of written across his forehead, theoretically. Like, I can't remember what his T-shirt was, but it's important. So maybe we'll on a rewatch, you check that out. But I think he kind of stands in for, like, this idea that the cold, conservative, like, push back against social activism, push back against justice, like, it doesn't have an answer for these real things. It looks Abundant Life on the surface, but then their staff can't even answer hard questions. Their prayer is surface. Like, they don't actually have, like, this kid thinks he's praying all the time, but he doesn't know a thing. Like, there's kind of this feeling that it's only so deep, and that at the end of the day, the real issues aren't being addressed.
Yeah.
And Toller is the one who's going to kind of stand up and be able to do that. And that's why he's referred to as the authority in this situation. Because he actually does have kind of that relationship. There's one other place. I think I want to point out here the name Balk of the industries. And there's also a place in the church, which is the media center, which is also paid for by Balk. So it's the Balk Media Center.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in there where Jeffers is giving kind of his daily video blog devotional on one of the Psalms. But the subject of it is don't worry. And I think these two things kind of combine together in a way, because the word balk, B-A-L-Q, is how it's spelled in the movie for the industry, but B-A-L-K, the meaning of to balk is to be unwilling to accept an idea, right?
Yeah.
You can see a shirt there?
Yeah, it's just pulling it up on my phone right now. Running through it. It's like a church with a face, maybe.
I thought I remembered it being important, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's just his comments. Like, there's just like his whole demeanor is like, so that kid, like, is there opposing Toller, basically saying that it's not about dollar signs, just not preaching prosperity, and then he jumps in to oppose that idea and opposes the idea of welfare, and just starts talking about, honestly, like, he's the voice of what is called like moral majority or right-wing Christianity. Like, every single, like, thing, political stand that we're, like, kind of known for, he kind of voices, just bullet point
that those folks are known for,
that our people are known for. That's my background.
Yeah.
So so he's kind of there to say that this church with these ideologies has no real moral standing at the end of the day, that they have no depth, that it's all on the surface. And once again, I come back to this, what I was saying earlier, with balk. Balk means to be unwilling to accept an idea. You hear something, you balk at it, means that that's silly, even when it's very well founded. And that's exactly what happens with this idea of climate change. Balks at it. And the idea is that kind of the social activism, which another important point is First Reformed is on the Underground Railroad.
Yep.
And Toller looks at this history at one point of all of the pastors there and thinks of them. He actually even specifically mentions that they were social activists. They were reformers.
Yeah.
They were,
No, I mean, they have the, at least twice where they talk about the Underground Railroad when they're given tours inside First Reformed.
Yeah. And so I think the point being that, like, he's taking up that mantle and he's taking part of that history of the church and rejecting the megachurch kind of conservative, forget about these social issues, let's just deal with these kind of things, kind of through the voice of Pastor Jeffers. They're kind of rejecting that as being superficial. And so I think that's the story. The story is the church. If you take together the politics of the church politics that goes on of the, fixing the organ and getting this reconstitution, or what is it called, reconsecration ceremony going.
It's like we got to get it paid for, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, we got to do, like, it's just kind of funny. He just has the power to make it happen. And money bags coming in, just making stuff happen for the church, and them turning a blind eye to these issues. And they don't even have answers for people dealing with real hurt. Their prayer is superficial. And ultimately, Toller himself is in this position, I believe, because he's kind of been just shuffled into it, totally unqualified as a measure to, once again, kind of deal with things, kind of not, instead of a head-on, like, direct dealing with somebody's actual soul, like, oh, he'll figure it out, we'll put him in this position, his wife works here on staff, so
maybe not.
These kind of things, and it just covers over.
It's
just a
really
hypocrisy,
yeah,
all the way through. So I think that's, to me, that's the moral of the movie.
Well, and it's always, because we've had a number of these conversations too. Like, that's where my thoughts have been on some of the more meta trends in the church lately. But if somebody were to ask you, hey, sentence or two, what's this movie about? That's kind of the direction you'd go with.
Yeah, if I was going to say, like, all right, final summary of the movie: a reverend through a soul transformation becomes an activist, exposing the hypocrisy of his conservative sponsoring church.
Interesting.
That's where I'd go with.
Nice.
How about you?
I mean, I just like to boil it down. I would just say it's about a man who has undergone a lot of personal tragedy. Like, it's funny how, like, a lot of the language that my mind uses to talk about pastors on film is Catholic, because that's typically what's represented the most. It's about a pastor who's undergone a lot of personal tragedy, who has a pretty violent crisis of faith.
Do you think it was a crisis to him?
Well, up to the book, because I mean, the movie begins. The journal is one of the first things introduced because he feels disconnected from God. And he doesn't, again, we're talking about a film created likely by an unbeliever dealing with things. So, but basically, like,
but an unbeliever
the creator
knows, theology.
Sure, but I mean, like, what the writer probably would say is that it's a man of faith who feels disconnected from God and then finds connection to God via, like, militant activism.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
And then finds salvation.
Yeah. Yeah, mash mine and Phillips up, and you got the movie pretty much.
It was good. I like
Yeah,
it.
that was fun.
So, okay. I don't know if we're going to keep this, but let's do...
Some takeaways? No? Reviews,
Do
ratings,
you have-
reviews?
Do you have takeaways?
Yeah, I do think that it's well-founded.
It's a very affecting movie. So, yeah, no, we should talk takes. I mean, you think more, you approach art more with the, like, what is somebody saying? Like, what are the propositions? What are the points? What are the...
I think I don't think you can write and help but tell a story. Like
No.
You know what I mean?
I mean, it's just two, like, that's why we've been friends our entire lives. We're
Yeah.
kind of two sides of, like...
I'm exegeting it in a way.
Sure.
Trying to, at least.
Yeah. Well, no,
Which-
and I do that as well, but I also am going for the emotional. Like, I don't like to overthink.
Right.
I'm a big fan of, especially film analysis,
Yeah.
not just, I mean, narrative analysis,
Yeah.
but film analysis. You can do so much.
Mhm.
Like, anyway,
Yeah, I
that's
felt
a
like I was
sidebar.
getting onto the spot. Like I could get too far with explaining everything, and then the film just becomes an allegory, right?
Or it's like you have made, like, you are eisegeting the film almost.
Correct.
In a sense, if you get an idea, not you, but like,
yeah,
you, like, when one approaches a film and go, oh, XYZ, I think are the main points. Let's look at the film through that lens.
yeah,
And then you could, especially with something as open-ended as this,
sure.
maybe, but like, I go, okay, what are the essential components? Like,
Yeah.
I usually, especially with a film,
Mhm.
like, I walk away with like, oh, like, what did that stir up in my mind? What did that make me feel? What did that make me think?
Yeah.
Not necessarily just what was he trying to say.
Yeah, well,
Because I think, like, I've heard him.
Yeah.
He's not necessarily, like, there are definitely things he is commenting on
right.
and addressing, but, like, he's not making points.
Yeah, I guess what it made me feel right away was like, actually, I was kind of upset a little bit actually. After
Also, for the record, let me interrupt you for a second.
Yeah.
I am very pleasantly surprised at your level of enjoyment
Yeah.
and engagement with this
Yeah.
film, because I've had you watch a lot of quote unquote
Garbage.
art I was gonna say quote unquote artsy films, higher auteur films, and
My earlier comment stands.
yeah, can't take you out to Ruth's Chris. It's just Wendy's and Taco Bell for you, I guess. And the
I love
cinematically
delicious
speaking.
steak, but if you throw it in the garbage and chop it up 3 ways to Sunday, I probably won't eat it. But anyway, no, I will say, I did enjoy the film. I was a little ticked in the fact that, like, when we watched it so late, we didn't have time to talk about it.
I know. I got a
And
pregnant wife
it
at
was
home,
just-
and I needed to
yeah.
run home to her.
No, it was totally understandable.
No,
from
no,
that
yeah.
sense.
I wish we could have had
But
more
I
time
was just
to
like,
decompress.
okay.
So he was also successful
He
because
just like eat shoots and leaves, man.
he's
It's just like-
famous for one of his main famous refrains is Paul Schrader believes a movie ought to
Yes.
finish on the sidewalk on your way back to your car. Like,
yeah, when you said that.
in your mind
then you
and
left.
talking about. See ya. Gotta go.
Yeah. The movie should finish by talking about it. So, see ya.
Peace out. Let's do that in 3 days.
So me and Christina talked about it for a while, and that's where I didn't have I had some theories. Like, I kind of had the basic, like, Michael transformation idea, like, right off the get-go.
The specific
I
him
didn't-
transferring to another person.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was essential to it or not, but definitely the
You
taking
could
on
call
of
it a
his
transmutation
mania or whatever
Yeah,
you want
yeah.
to call it.
It's definitely like there's something about his soul.
It was
that
contagious.
There's something about Michael's essence or soul that he absorbs, or becomes. But I didn't initially see how all of the other, like, church hypocrisy and prayer and journal stuff and despair fit into it, and so that took me a little bit more writing out, organizing ideas, which some of which I did today. But I think that was the initial thought. Like, after the movie, I wanted to talk about it.
Next time we'll
so-
schedule it better.
Yeah, no, it was cool.
Well, the next film I have in
but I liked
mind
that.
has much more hope.
But I did
almost
like
no
that.
despair.
Yeah. Well, I felt like there was definitely despair, but at the same time, like, in a sense, the
Substantive despair.
theory of the despair of the film is that you need it, right, for hope,
Yes.
and it's almost
And
presented.
to push you towards that activism that the film portrays as redeeming,
Righteous. Yeah.
sanctifying it.
Yeah.
Like, is theologically speaking, the film views good social work as sanctifying.
Well, and yeah, so you've got this guy who like he's really in a sense like caring for people, and he's caring for creation and taking this on. He cares about this guy Michael so much that he takes up his own cause, right?
Sure.
Becomes him in a sense, and he's actually caring for it all the while this other institution is characterized by bulk, and the one sermon bite we hear from Jeffers is about don't worry.
Well, and that's another thing we didn't talk about, but I mean, it's an hour and a half long film. Jeffers does kind of chide Toller that kind of using biblical language of you're always in the garden, like you're always in the Garden of Gethsemane, you're always agonizing. And he even said, God doesn't want our suffering, but like Christ suffered for us.
Yeah.
So that we could have life abundantly.
So, and that's the tough part is like,
that's
right.
That's
gospel true. I think that's what some people maybe.
Well, it's the difference between eternal
right here.
Eternal perspective, temporary perspective.
I think that's where some people would say, yeah, that's just preaching the gospel. And I think that's exactly what the film, I mean, obviously not exactly. The film was written before the incident that I just alluded to. But there's a sense in which, like, it is saying that kind of mentality is incorrect, is wrong. And this other mentality seems more genuine.
Well, and again, that's where you can say broad strokes. They're two different ends of the spectrum, because Ethan Hawke's, I mean, again, there's a lot of theological muddiness. I'm not speaking in a pure, like, truth kind of manner about it. It's a film.
You go on a whole bunch of impossible missions, you start to lose perspective.
Ethan Hawke's character, he's not admirable in it. Like, there is admirable suffering.
When you stand outside exemplary. The film,
well, if you're anybody who's observing him, he's not exemplary or admirable.
He's like an alcoholic,
in
despairing alcoholic.
Yeah, who eventually wraps barbed wire around himself and drinks Drano. Like, that is not like
maybe
masochism and self-harm and self-isolation, which is spiritual self-harm. Like, those things are not admirable or exemplary.
Well, depends on who you ask, though, too. Because monasticism is actually really huge on that. And he's studying a Catholic monk, right? Who was an activist, and actually...
And Chesterton, too, is in that stack.
I didn't see that one.
That doesn't have anything to do with this.
Very interesting that Thomas Merton, the circumstances of his death are in doubt. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Say again?
Thomas Merton, he's mentioned several times throughout the film, the monk. The circumstances of his death are somewhat unsettled.
Oh,
some people believe that he was murdered, actually, because the cause of his death was not explained very well. There's some conspiracy theories out there, but he died as a social activist, and so I do kind of feel like that this is kind of, even if it's maybe an unconscious bias of the writer, it comes through as this is more genuine.
Yes.
He's not like...
No, he believes, like, on the side of the social... Like, he believes that if you claim to love God, let's say, to kind of use the simplest...
Sure.
He believes, I would imagine, from what I've heard and read, that, like, if you love God, you can't do nothing.
Correct.
Like, you can't sit idly by and just... be like the people in the Bible who are just like getting out their lawn chairs and like looking up in the sky and like waiting. They're like, oh, we're living for the next one.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get to work.
And that's exactly the aspersions kind of cast on Abundant Life Church, is that their philosophy is don't worry. And God's got it.
Enjoy
and
this.
Yeah. Creation's going to be redeemed. Who cares?
Christ already suffered. So like, why would we seek it out?
Yeah. And so is that biblical? Is that a legit concept?
No.
Okay,
When
to
taken
what
that far.
extent?
Yeah, when taken that far.
Yeah. I mean, so is Jeffers biblical? Like, is he the hero for the Christian watching this movie? Is he the
no.
guy you're supposed to be?
No.
Okay,
You don't have one of those.
right.
Other than potentially Mary, but she's got some weird stuff too.
Really?
She is, I mean, I don't think there's any, actually.
No.
I was just saying she's probably the purest one of them all, as far as she's trying to cultivate life. She's trying to help her husband. She's trying to make Tuller ride a bike and get him out there. Like, she's the one who is got the softest heart. Because there's a scene, she's like, oh yeah, like, I care about this stuff too, but like, I just didn't do violent stuff to get me locked up.
Yeah.
So like, she cares, but she's also compassionate.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So
With the values of the writer, she's the pure one.
interesting. So let me put a question to you this way then. For the Christian watching this,
Okay.
or even maybe just the theologically minded person watching this, what's here for them? What's here for them to learn? You know, we talk a lot about, like, I think you hear a lot of stuff about people, they want to redeem the culture, they want to do something, like, they want to do something productive with it.
Sure.
What is that for this movie?
Not everybody would agree that this is a virtue, but I
That's
would
fine.
say provocation.
Okay.
Preface, one, it's an amazing piece of work. It like excellence in an end of itself that's not rife with questionable content. Like, it is an excellent film.
That's true.
So
I did
it's
appreciate
not
that.
filled with things that would keep it from being easily recommendable.
Yeah.
So it's not filled with foul language. It's not filled with sexual.
like, you were able to sit
content.
down here in a room with me and Christina
Yeah.
and not feel weird to watch the movie.
You know, it's dark. There's some intenseness, but
Yeah.
I actually don't even think there was any swearing above anything that the MPA would call like mild language, if even that.
Yeah. It's really just the themes that are dark.
Yeah, there's a few scenes of aftermath of violence, and when he's wrapping the barbed wire around himself, it's a little grim.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it earns its art. And actually, I've had this conversation with a few other people. I kind of pine for the days where films were rated R, because it was just a mature film. It was a film made for like grown-ups. Like, it was a film made for thinking grown-ups. And yeah, it might like have some stuff, but like, so for one, it's an excellent film. But really, like a stimulating, like provocative thing to cause you, like, I think that anybody who, what did you say in regards to like Christians or the thinking or theological person?
Yeah. Who's looking at this film for like a value to them and or their soul or their worldview.
I mean, soul, I don't know if I would say anything beyond necessarily excellence, because again,
I think, let me offer something on here. Maybe I haven't answered a little bit to my own question, is, as I found myself doing, is just kind of thinking through like the assumptions of, it kind of presents, Toller is presented with this, like, what
it
tradition,
is very probing. Yeah.
what tradition do you want to stand in? What legacy do you want yours to be?
Legacy.
What do
yeah.
you want the impact of your life to be?
Your life and ministry and the accumulation of like your life's work. Like, what do you want it to look like?
And do you want it to be, and I think it kind of, not to get too preachy on this one point, but it almost kind of puts it to be like caring about actual issues in the world,
Okay.
people in the world, life in the world,
Sure.
and the things that are there. Or, I mean, on the other hand, it was almost like building a ministry empire.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so much where you could say, as an individual, as a Christian, like, you can just live for yourself, for your own. It doesn't have to be a ministry empire. It can be football on Sundays, comfortable life, that kind of thing. But are you living for that? Or are you living to make a difference?
Yeah.
And I would say,
Living
as a
a full
believer,
life or an impactful
living
life.
and it's funny, in a sense, Toller is the one with the abundant life. because he's the one living for an impact. He's the one living to make a difference. He's the one living true to his convictions. He's the one living in a sense that is lining up with reality and the scientific data, like that kind of thing. Like he has imbibed truth, and he's radical. He's not commendable,
But
he's broken. He's
he's-
despairing, but yet he has hope, and yet he lives.
He's living drastically and actively in light of his convictions.
Right. And I think there's a sense in which, like, what do we live for? Like, how radical are we willing to be for the kingdom? Like, obviously, with a lot more dose of like biblical, scriptural, revelational truth,
Actual truth, yeah.
that yields a lens on the world. But at the same time, like I the tension in me, like, right, like when you see a movie that doesn't have the solution, sometimes, like, the way I am is I want, like,
What
there
is
to
it?
be the moral thing, yeah. And I just wanted somebody to go, like, step in between, like, the Tollers and Jeffers conversation and just be like, yes, like, there's stuff going on with the world, yes, Christ is redeeming it, like, can we just, like, agree that, like, the main thing is people's souls, but at the same time, like, redeemed souls probably care for God's earth, like, and don't just trash it for the sake of it, be for financial expediency. So I don't, just stuff like that. But anyway, that's, I think, if I would
then,
say to
yes,
the Christian
I
watching
would
this
agree.
movie,
It could challenge you
Yeah.
on your own devotion and your own consistency.
Yeah.
Are you living a principled, if not, like, do you truly and radically believe what you actually believe?
yeah. And is it something that's like,
Does it bear out in your life?
is it there to make an impact for people in real life, or is it kind of a cordoned off thing where really the only thing being made an impact on is your wallet?
That's fair.
So, yeah, that would be my sole takeaway for it.
Very
So,
good movie.
yeah. How about this question then?
Yeah,
I think I already know the answer to it.
sure.
Would you recommend it?
So,
You want to institute some sort of rating system here?
we can talk about that.
Sure.
Maybe. That's kind of
Right,
one of
Mark?
the things I want to talk about before the show.
Okay.
But I would, for the most part, recommend it. My this is kind of funny. I was talking with my wife about this.
My wife.
She's a sensitive soul.
Yeah. Has she seen the movie?
No. She.
Really?
Yeah.
Maybe not the
Human-
best timing right now.
Certainly not. But even just with the way she, like, human darkness, really, like, darkness in the world, and, like, human darkness really has a certain kind of effect on her. So I would not be quick to,
There is that.
somebody who's maybe overly melancholic and depressive, I maybe wouldn't necessarily say go see it, but yeah, for the most part, it's not an easy watch. It's not like a Saturday morning kicking
Yeah.
your feet up with your cereal and watching it.
I think that is a good point. Like, in recommending the film, there are some definite triggers for probably sufferers of PTSD, depressive, kind of episode, that kind of stuff in here,
If
because
suicide has affected you, maybe.
yeah,
Like there's it doesn't pull any punches. It goes for the and that's right. I love things that deal with like the full human experience. My wife is one of those people, and my mother is as well. Actually, I would certainly not recommend this to her. Some people go to the movies, and it's not necessarily wrong. It's just different, just to relax and enjoy themselves.
that's me.
Yeah.
I would say, like, I don't,
Which is why
I would never buy
at
a
the
ticket
very
for this-
beginning
for
of this film,
movie.
I was like, I hope you don't hate that I made you watch this.
That's funny. No, I love, and you know me, like, I love a movie that's provocative and makes me think.
Yes.
But I'm not going to go to a movie for the experience of the film itself. Like, typically, if I'm gonna go pay $10 a ticket plus whatever popcorn my wife needs, which is like 4 times the price of a ticket.
Cinemar.
It's
no
like
popcorn or drink.
it's like $1 per kernel.
No, going to the movies.
I'm
isn't
gonna
cheap
do
depending
that
on
for
where
an
you go.
experience that, like, I'm gonna come out and be like, that was fun. You know, like
Sure.
I'm glad that I went to a really large screen
Sure, yeah.
with some really expensive speakers
Yeah,
and a
you
really
have
nice seat.
Disney, Pixar, Marvel, like those are the fun ones.
Yeah. And I don't, probably indie filmmakers who make these kind of like think pieces hate that I'm saying this right now in a sense because I mean their bread and butter's probably made a lot from, people actually being willing to go to the theaters for that kind of stuff. So I feel
I
for
saw this
that.
at the Glenwood Art Theater at 95th.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean for me it is kind of something where I enjoy a movie that will cause me to think, cause me to assess. Like,
Yeah, if you're up for being an active viewer and you're not necessarily timid is the right word. Yeah, if you're up for a good active viewing, yeah, I'd recommend this across the board.
So, yeah, I think I think I would.
If you're not going through a bout of blueness.
Yeah, I'd say obviously check your soul and where are you at? How does the human depressive kind of stuff affect you? How does
if you
suicide
read,
and gore affect you?
If you have heard our talk, or if you just read a plot synopsis and you're not immediately turned off, then yes, I would recommend.
But yeah, I would say in general I could recommend this film as well. It's in a sense,
and it's a great, like you said, it's a great provocative. It is a great stimulator. It's a great conversation starter.
It's also very real.
Yeah.
And I know one of the things we're trying to do here on the Substance is talk about stuff that is substantive, something that is true.
Yes.
And I think
that's why I thought it would be a perfect first one.
I think there is a lot about this film that are themes that are true.
Yes.
And
addresses them seriously. I wouldn't agree with a number of like the perspectives, but it's all done very genuinely, very truthfully to itself.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think just
there's no cliches, there's no caricatures. Really, I mean, kind of sort of it's a movie, but like there's no easy answers, or there's no like if you are a thinking person with any sort of church background at all, you see this movie, you know these people, you know these characters. These are not just wild caricatures.
Yeah. And hopefully, at the end of the day, in the perfect world, the abundant lives of the world can learn from, in a sense, the failure to really minister to Toller and the failure to include his accurate, in a sense, perspective of caring for God's creation into the redemptive scheme of the gospel.
Absolutely.
That they're already kind of an adherent to.
Yeah, and the first reforms can not have a weak theology of joy. Like, it's not about financial, temporal enjoyment, but a true and lasting like joy and satisfaction that comes from knowing God.
Yeah. And maybe more churches then could be reformed.
That?
Not speaking theologically necessarily there in doctrine, but like to really,
as a verb,
to really, to reform themselves and to align themselves more truthfully to the heart of God in the Scripture.
Being like open to being refined.
All right. Well, you have anything else to say about First Reformed 2 hours in?
Well, no, go check it out. Check it out and bring somebody with you.
Yeah, enjoy. Weirdly, probably not.
I enjoyed it.
You'll enjoy talking about it. Probably as long as we have. All right, well, we'll see you next week on The Substance.
I missed
No,
that.
you can just be like, yo, welcome to The Substance. My name's Trevor.
And I'm Philip.
And you are listening to the very first ever Substantive Cinema.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Hmm.
Yo,
Getting a little bit of
what up? We talking?
speaker's block here.
Yeah, you just say the things. Just say a thing.